Australian financial services law is notoriously complex, with the Corporations Act alone being the second largest piece of legislation in the Commonwealth Statute Book. How did Michelle Levy go about simplifying the system?
If you were talking to the government today and you were to say to them, these are the most important recommendations that we need to get up to reduce complexity, make sure that our clients get really, really good help and, it's accessible to all Australians, what would you say to them?
So it's definitely the three that are probably the most controversial. That is what will make advice more accessible to people. It will mean that all institutions are able to help their customers by answering direct questions and simple questions and giving nudges and prompts when people need it. And what that is the expansion of the definition of personal advice so that personal conversations, which include recommendations, will all be treated as personal advice. And the reason that's important is because then you have the consumer protection provisions which will apply to that advice, with the main one being the good advice. So that's the second component that is really vital here, because good advice is easier. It's not about a lower quality than best interest duty. It's about focusing on the content of the advice and making sure you get that advice right, so that and fit for purpose. It means that you can scale advice more easily. It doesn't mean your advice is poorer. And then the final piece in that puzzle is if you expand personal advice, you can't have all advice given by financial advisors. Currently there are 16,000 financial advisors in Australia. That won't expand dramatically even if these recommendations are made. You can't rely on the advisor population to meet all of the advice needs of Australians, and nor do we need to, because they are not all difficult, and in many cases they can be supported. The people giving that advice can be helped by digital programs and technology.
In the report, you really paint a picture of the fact that our regulatory regime has over the years had layers and layers added on to it. So it's made it a really, really complex system. Through the report and your recommendations, it's all about simplifying that complexity. How do you ensure that in 10 years' time, we're not talking about the same thing? Did you take that into the account when you were putting forward your recommendations?
I have tried to draft the proposed recommendations in a way that lend themselves to kind of simple and spare principles-based, to use a difficult sort of concept really, legislation. So of course I can't stop a future government coming in and passing more legislation. I have tried to strip, I have tried to make it simple in the hope that there will be less need to keep constantly adding to it. What we have is a law that is layered because every time there's a scandal or a particular incident, the response of the government of the day is to pass more law. They don't take anything away. So FOFA was based on an understanding that disclosure was insufficient. So we've got disclosure-based regime. In 2002, we get FOFA, which is not conduct-based regime, but it layers on top of what isn't working. So I'm trying to strip all of that out.
You've observed some confusion in the industry about ASIC's role. For example, some financial advisors seeing ASIC's regulatory guidance as the law. Yep. So to what extent does your recommendations help clarify ASIC's role and get rid of that confusion?
Yeah. So ASIC is not, in the main, there are some exceptions, a lawmaker. Their regulatory guidance is exactly that. It's intended to help people comply with their obligations, but often will give examples. Again, they are just that, they are examples. So my recommendations, if they are made law, rely less, I hope, on regulatory guidance to support them, because I hope that it is clearer what is required to meet a good advice duty than, for example, the best interest duty. Not, as I keep coming back to, no one knows what it means. And so that makes it really hard for a financial advisor to know what to do. And so they look to ASIC.
Yeah.
So I hope and think that they should not need to look to ASIC as much. ASIC ultimately is an enforcer. We need ASIC to be looking for breaches of the law and taking action, not helping people to tell them what to do. They don't give them the business model.